There's things that when you think of someone who's devout and say holy or something, what do they do? And I don't really do that, and I should. You put a little bit of your life in your hands of your faith, and you kind of say, well, you're maybe led where you're meant to be. I think that there's three vocations that a person has. You either become a religious person like a priest or a nun or something like that. Another one is that you marry. I see that as something religious when you marry, or you stay single, and that's a legitimate faith choice. Actually, I called the recording AMDG, which my dad used to put on all his mail. And I asked him once what that meant, and he said it means to the greater glory of God. Yeah, so I was flattered that you asked me to join you and share with you. And it's kind of hard to know what to talk about because I think so many aspects of a person intertwine to what they do, and it's kind of hard to separate out. Like I know you mentioned learning and development, and yes, I do learning and development, but it's so many other things that carried me along on my journey. It's kind of hard to strip that out sometimes because I know I mentioned, my faith as well. I'm a Catholic, and I mean, I'm a regular churchgoer and stuff, but you put a little bit of your life in your hands of your faith, and you kind of say, well, you're maybe led where you're meant to be. Or right now, you might be aware in Wellington, New Zealand, there's a lot of people that have lost their jobs, especially in the government space, where I'm also in currently. And I told him, I said, well, sometimes you go to a job not because you're meant to be there, but for yourself, because someone will say, gosh, why am I at this job? This doesn't seem to fit me at all. But I say, sometimes you're in a job for other people. Maybe you're meant to touch someone's life or intersect with them in life and say the one thing that helps them through a situation, or they see a behavior that maybe, gets them thinking a little bit. So part of where I've ended up has been, with my faith. And I also have to kind of laugh. Somebody asked me the other day, I'm currently working at Civil Aviation Authority, and we've restructured a little bit. So there's some new people I'm working with. So I had another Teams call with someone, and I told them about some of my past experience. And when I share it, you'll hear I've been in all kind of sectors and industries, and you're like, how did you end up here? They seem so disconnected. And I'm like, yes, they do. All I can do is agree that they're very, very different. And it's just kind of been my life journey.
What I actually did note down was, yes, to talk to you about your learning and development career, because from my experience with you, it's where I've seen your expertise come into fruition. I've had, the experience of sitting in a couple of your training sessions, especially around leadership sessions as well, which have been really good and thought provoking. So I wanted to talk about that learning and development aspect of who you are. But I also did note down that I did want to talk to you about your faith, but also the fact that you also perform as well in, or we're really in a Catholic circle, should I say? Is that the correct way of describing it? I've noticed that you do perform in
Well,
that area and
uh,
do a lot of
I've
singing.
done theater ever since I was a child. I started out in choirs, and then when I was in the fifth grade, they put on a school play, and the choir was like the chorus. So they picked people from the choir to start getting into theater. So I've actually performed ever since I was a little kid. And you move into like community theater, and then start doing high quality community theater, and then I start doing some professional theater, and then I've got my equity card. So that's actually part of my journey as well. Um, but it hasn't always been, say, sacred performing. I've done, a lot of show tunes and Broadway musical type things. I didn't perform on Broadway, but I did that. I did an equivalent level of professional theater, mainly down in Florida. And I'm in the union. I'm in the Actors Equity Association, which is the professional union to do, say, Broadway. Um, but then what happened was when I was doing my professional performing and traveling, I did a lot of concert singing, theater. Um, I had a friend that ran a dance studio, and I taught like theater to dance students, like younger children. Um, but I traveled a little bit in Europe. That was mainly to sing, to do, say, concert singing, more classical type stuff. But my theater was what I really enjoyed. I did light opera like Student Prince, Desert Song, and musical theater like Brigadoon or, ones you'd be familiar with like South Pacific, Oklahoma, those kind of shows. So that's what I really, really, really loved. But what happened was, um, I guess all along I was trying to, like, again, with my faith, I think that there's three vocations that a person has. You either become a religious person, like a priest or a nun or something like that. Another one is that you marry. I see that as something religious when you marry, or you stay single, and that's a legitimate faith choice. And I think deep down we're meant to be one of those. You could be whatever you want in life, but I think there's one thing that's your nature that God kind of intends for you. I didn't mean to start talking about all religion stuff. But so I was really trying to discern that. And I didn't really think that I was called to be a priest. I think you could be a good person no matter what you do. Um, and so I was trying to decide between being single and being married. And then once you think that you are called to be married, then it's finding the right person. Then you got the second part you got to figure out. So anyway, I was doing my theater and enjoying it, but I knew that I couldn't really marry with the lifestyle of being a performer because you'd get cast in a production that would run maybe like you'd have maybe say 3 weeks of rehearsal, and then you would do a run of a show that lasted a couple months, and then it would finish, and then you'd have to look and you'd get another show. And so part of it was that I didn't think I could marry with that lifestyle. But then the other thing, it was had a lot of anxiety because you'd be halfway through a show and you have to start lining up the next show. And it's getting the timing right. For anybody who contracts, it's kind of similar, no matter what profession you're in. You're finishing up one job, you got to line up the next one. And then you might get an offer and it's like, oh, should I take that one or should I wait for another one to see if I get a bigger part? You're trying to get a specific role. So I thought I might enjoy theater more as a hobby because then you could be selective in what you do. If you're not needing it to earn a living, if I could find a job where I could do theater on the side, I could say, oh, you know, no, I'll skip on that. I don't have to worry. I don't need it for the money. I'm doing it just for the enjoyment. And you could kind of be a little more flexible. And then what I also found, again, with flexibility is that since my main strength was a vocalist, if I did, say, concert singing, instead of a show running a couple months, concerts would be for just a few evenings. Like you might rehearse a little bit, but then you only have, say, three concerts at a concert hall. So I actually was dating a girl at the time that became a flight attendant. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I could be a flight attendant because then you have a lot of flexibility in your work.
But you're
Uh,
traveling a lot though as well though in that
but you are traveling a lot.
role.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So, right. But it was kind of, I thought maybe a happy medium that I would give it a try. So I did become a flight attendant. And then what I found in the airline industry is they have a lot of different types of roles in the airline industry. So then I started to get to the point where I was training flight attendants because I was also, as I said, I taught theater to younger children. I taught religion at my church. They have what's called CCD or catechism classes. And I had like teenagers, so I quite enjoyed doing that. I never had a lot of money. So I I thought, well, I can't really give to the church financially, but what I can do is give a gift of myself a little bit. So that's why I
And
try
your
to be in
time.
some of these things
Yeah.
at church. Yeah, gift of my time or different talents. So that's one thing that I offered up was to, like I said, to do these CCD classes. So I did always kind of have a knack for training, so to speak, or teaching. And I did have some colleagues that said, "Oh, you should become a teacher." But I ended up going into, well, when I was doing theater, not to backtrack, my parents were concerned about doing that for a living. So they said, well, if you want to go into theater, do what you want, but we'd really recommend that you get a major from college in a different field. So I actually got a degree, a bachelor degree in business management. And then once I finished that 4-year degree, then I went into my professional theater. But it worked out quite well that I had this degree because then I could find work much more easily. And later on, I'll tell you that actually helped me get into New Zealand by having that qualification. But what I did was I became a flight attendant, taught flight attendants. So started to get in learning and development. I did a little bit of concert singing, but then what happened is uh, I thought to myself, you know what? I'd really like to make a recording of sacred music because when you're at church for the Catholics and you sing in the front of church, you're not meant to be a performer. I know sometimes in the Christian faiths, it's a little bit more of a like entertainment, so to speak. I mean, it's a religious entertainment, but it's still where you're more of a performer, so to speak. Where in Catholics, when you cantor, you just lead the people to sing. You're not meant to be like the star of the show. But yet, I never could feel it
I think
fully.
that's how it's supposed to be in Christianity, but we
Oh,
have a sense of people who want to perform, which personally, from my own view, I feel that that's wrong. It should actually be to lead the congregation into worship rather than wanting to be the focal point. Yeah, but yeah, I agree.
and
Mm.
that was just my perception. Like I said, if and I'm not putting anybody down. I'm just saying that from where I was in my space, I couldn't really let loose musically as much as I felt that I wanted to. I had that burning desire to sing, but not perform at mass. So what can I do? So I thought, you know what? I'd really like to make a recording. So, yeah, so even the music that ended up being on my first recording was very, I feel that my faith kind of, God kind of guided that. Like originally I was going to do all songs to the Blessed Mother because the Catholics have quite a fondness for Mary. And, um, but anyway, so I was doing this other play with just a local play at this other friend who had at a church. And we did the thing about the Passion during Easter time. And Via Dolorosa was one of the pieces there. And I thought, boy, that's really moving. So I sang that at my church with the organist. And once we had done it, we're like, that has to be on the recording. That has got to be included. So that kind of threw off my what I should do. I was going to do all these different Ave Marias from around the world because Ave Maria just means Hail Mary. And people think of either the Schubert or the Gounod, but there's thousands of Ave Marias. But anyway, so I ended up putting together a recording of sacred music, and it was such a moving experience for me to have made that. It was really, I did it as much for myself as anyone, but now I have this CD and cassette tape at the time. So, and actually, I called the recording AMDG, which my dad used to put on all his mail. And I asked him once what that meant, and he said it means to the greater glory of God, ad Majorem Dei Gloriam. So I never forgot that. And so now if you ever get a letter from me or anyone else does, you'll see an AMDG on there, and that's what that means. I just put it tiny on there somewhere on the envelope or something. But so that's what I named my first recording, and it became really popular, and sold quite a bit, and I sold one on every continent. Well, I used to say it went on 6 of the 7 continents because Antarctica, I never had anybody, but then someone for me as a birthday present, it was probably one of the nicest birthday presents I ever got. They purchased one and sent it to like a chapel that's on Antarctica to use as music down there. So I could now say that I was on every continent with my stuff. So, So that was really nice. And then, like I said, everything started to overlap a little bit because then I was also with the airline. And so then I got invited to sing at some things in Europe from my recording. And some venues were able to allow me to cover airfare and some weren't. So I said, well, I can get discounted airfare.
So
So it
just with
opened
this,
up.
how old was you during this period where you started singing and then you had that opportunity, as you've just mentioned, to travel? Was you in your like early 20s?
Um, I was in my late 20s when I started with the airline. Uh, yep. So that's about where I was. I did professional theater before the airline, so I was probably in my 20s when I did my most of my professional theater. Uh, yeah, and I also worked on like a cruise ship. I did, all different kinds of performing, whatever you can come up with. Um, but yep, so then and I know I talk a lot. I'm not letting you ask me many questions, so just jump in. I get going and I'm on a roll. Um, I was afraid when you were arranging this. I thought, gosh, I won't know what to say. I've done a lot of radio interviews, but I've never done a podcast. This is my first podcast,
Mm.
and I thought, well, I guess they're just longer, where I talk more, and then it's not like answer question or question answer question answer question answer. So as I'm reflecting, let's see. So I was saying, yeah, I had some opportunities to sing in Europe. And then I also toured with a choir in Europe and sang, had some nice opportunities there, sang at the Vatican. And
How long did you
then
spend there
in Europe,
in at the Vatican? Sorry.
well, it was just for, we sang at a Vatican High Mass, it's called, which is the one that the Pope does because they have masses all day long.
Oh yeah.
Pope John Paul II was Pope at the time. And then we also did a concert where I had some solos in the concert at their concert hall, which is St. Ignatius, which would be like our version of like Carnegie Hall. So they have like a big concert hall, and that's what it is. Where they have candlesticks that are like twice your height. It's this big giant place. Uh, and then I got invited to sing around some places, and it turned out that, and then I was on this chat group of Catholic musicians online, and there was somebody from New Zealand on it, and I made a joke. I said, "Oh well, if you guys will have me out, I'll come sing there sometime." And they said, "Oh, good idea." And they went and talked to a gentleman that ran a religious convention in New Zealand, and they hired me, just from her recommendation. He had never heard me sing, the guy that ran it. And then I came out and sang in Auckland. I met my future wife's aunt and uncle there, and they said, "Oh, you must meet our niece." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, of course. Everybody's always got a niece they want to meet." But I was single, and they knew that I was looking to marry because I did feel that was, what I was drawn to.
Mm.
Uh, but didn't do that. And then I actually was invited back to New Zealand to sing, and I had a prior commitment at another concert of this real tiny place in, I think it was Minnesota. And I said, "Oh, I would love to come, but I just can't because I've got to sing at this, I'm already committed myself." So they appreciated that I, you know, held to my commitments. And then they did invite me back a second time. And then when I went back the second time, then I was introduced to this niece. And I was like, man, why did I wait so long to meet this niece? Because I was starting to get a little bit older, having performed. And then I ended up where I dated for 2 years, flying back and forth to New Zealand while I was with the airline, but I could only, because of the schedule, I could only fly like once a month and I'd go for maybe 3 or 4 days at a time, and that was it. So there was no hiding that I liked her because you can't say, "Hey, you want to see a movie next week?" I'm, and you fly to another country to go to the
Yeah.
movie. It was obvious that, you can't hide it. So it kind of moved the relationship fairly quickly. And then we married, and my wife let me know that she wanted, she would have expected to stay in New Zealand because her parents were there. And so I moved and everything and got married, and it all fell into place. That's kind of how that went. So I was
Is your
working,
wife a
as I said,
Kiwi?
with the airline. Pardon me?
Is your wife a
I'm
Kiwi?
sorry?
Is your wife a
Yes.
Kiwi? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So my kids, we call them Yankee Wees.
Yankee Wees.
We have two kids, a son and a daughter, and the son is Joey. My wife had no choice in his naming because in America we name the oldest son after the dad usually. Like my dad's name is Joseph. I actually have a brother named Joseph as well that passed. He passed as a baby and was the eldest son. And so when I was born, my parents gave me the same name. So that's quite an honor to have carried that over. So there's a lot of Josephs around. My wife teases me. And we have a daughter, Grace, that she got to name the daughter, but it all worked out okay. So I had worked with the airline, came to New Zealand, uh, and of course, I just wanted any kind of work at all, whatever I could find. I didn't really want to go in the airline industry, however, if I could help it, because in America, the airline industry just started to struggle. I don't know if you remember, there was a number of years there where they laid off a lot of people. They were really having tough times with that industry. And I figured that that was going to start coming to New Zealand because usually the US, it would happen first and then it carries over to some of the other countries. So I would apply. I think I was applying to like 100 places a day. I just went on a seek and I thought, well, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And I was just frantically trying to find work. I thought, well, I can pump gas well, now they don't even pump gas anymore. I could dig holes or whatever. But I ended up getting a job at Miter 10, and I got a job at Miter 10 as their head of training for the Wellington area, Wellington region, because they're privately owned stores. So we had two at the time.
So your experience with the airline going from a flight attendant to teaching kind of gave you the platform to get that role
Yeah,
at
training
Mitre
flight
10.
attendants gave me the
Yeah.
platform to train, right,
Yeah.
to basically train.
And how many years
And
was you
I took
training in the airline for to get that experience behind you?
Well, I was at the airline a long time. I was there 17 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I was there a long time, but I didn't teach the whole time. I was a
Right.
flight attendant for so many years, and then I kind of did theater alongside it.
Yeah.
But I did more concert singing rather than the theater because I found that hard to do, like I said, with the time commitment.
Hmm.
And yeah, I was there quite a long time. That's another part of my story. I tend to be places a long time. When I worked at Miter 10, I was at Miter 10 for 12 and a half years.
And you remind me of that role. Was it head of training? Did you just say?
Yeah, they called it the
Yeah.
training champion.
Yeah.
It was basically the training manager for the Wellington area, but they never had a trainer. So I
Hmm.
did everything from scratch. And then what happened is I think originally they saw the role as being quite small, but I started growing it and doing a lot of things with the role and getting creative and, really coming up with good inductions. And I was actually hired for both the training and also the culture. They wanted me to have like recognition programs and stuff that I developed. So, yep. So I did that. And then,
Was that to
uh,
change the culture or to
yeah, to improve the
uh,
culture of the
right?
organization.
Was it
Yep.
quite bad there?
Um, well, there were pockets.
Yeah. Oh,
And
okay.
I kind of came in and I looked at it through my crystal ball and like, I can do that. I can say, okay, that's where an issue is and that's where an issue is.
Yeah.
That's what we need to work on. That's what we need to deal with. And then how can we improve it? And um, yeah, the only thing that started to happen was that people were liking me
Mm.
because I was the one that was the conduit of all these things. And it kind of separated us from the operational team a little bit. And so the managers weren't getting the kudos so much. I was because I
Right.
was doing all the recognition things. So we slowly transitioned that into the management team. But I kind of learned as I went along and grew. One benefit with being them for that number of years is that with induction, for example, we tried induction several different ways. So over time, I was able to see how different versions of it did quite well and which ones weren't as good. Like it started out as maybe a 1 day induction, and then became 2 day, and then it became a week long, and then it became 3 months where they work alongside and coaching on the job at the same time. And um, yeah, so because you try to accommodate the business, they hire somebody, they need him to start right away, and it's like, well, they have to be inducted. So what are you going to cover? Um, so it was, yes, it was quite good. Now, because they're member cooperatives, they're called members cooperatives. They have like a headquarters out of Auckland that run some things, but they were behind what we were designing in the store. Like I was ahead of any L&D that was done nationally because I was a role specifically dedicated to that. So then nationally, they started to catch up over time, over the years, with a lot of things that were being done. And they were trying to standardize stuff across the country. And I was trying to grow in my role. Excuse me. So I started to do some work nationally for Miter 10, where they would pay my store to use me, and they would maybe fly me to a new store to deliver a leadership program. That's how I started doing some leadership programs, some of the soft skills. Uh, and so I did that. I remember Queenstown, I got to go down there for 2 weeks. That was pretty awesome. My first time down south to Queenstown, it was like everywhere you look's a photograph. Wow.
Yeah, it's a very picturesque place.
Yeah,
Mm.
picturesque. And New Zealand's very healing country, I always said. It's very healing. I don't know why, if it's the nature that's here or it's a slower pace of life.
Mm.
It was like going back in time in the US from about maybe 30 years earlier.
So you went through a time machine when you went down south.
Yeah, like we've got a wood burner. I don't have it going now, but it's like that's our source of heat. You mean I'm cold in the morning and I have to make a fire before the house can warm up? And they're like, "Oh no, it works. Really. Just try it before you get because I'm used to full gas heat and
Yeah.
everything." Yeah, so that's how I kind of get into it. So I was working at Miter 10, and then I tried to do some national things, but I really outgrew the role. I couldn't move up anymore. I couldn't earn more money because even when nationally they used me, I didn't see the money. They paid my store to use me. So I just couldn't grow. But because I had been there so long, you get kind of scared looking for other work. And I looked for other work, and Red Cross had the opening.
Would you
And
say
it was
scared?
their
Would you
first
say,
learning person.
sorry to interrupt, would you say scared looking for work, or would you more think it was you become more comfortable uh, in that you just can't be bothered to look for work?
Right. Well, part of it's can't be bothered, but part of it is like you're not happy there because you want to grow and you can't.
Mm-mm. Yeah, yeah.
But
But
yet,
being that learning and development champion, you could have wrote actually in development to actually, you know, propel you even further up. You using strategic methods to do it.
no, you're right. And
Yeah.
over time, yeah, right. As you say, I mean, yeah, the big thing with learning development is that I feel like I help people. I'm there to help. I go to a team and say, even if it's a large company with several departments, if I go to each area and say, what is your struggle? This is what I have that can help you or how I can help you. Um, And so that's what I really like about it. I mean, OD is similar to L&D, but they're more focused on the organization. What does the organization need to function in the way of learning versus what does an individual person need in the way of learning? So that's kind of the big difference. There's a lot of overlap with jobs, but L&D, the learning and development, that's what I really like about it. And I know I kind of tell the slow story. My wife would say, get to the point already. Um, but again, I got into Red Cross. And that's where we first met, as you know.
Mm, mm,
Um, when I got hired at Red Cross, my manager said, "Don't worry about Red Cross. We've been here 100 years," because they just celebrated their 100th anniversary, I think,
mm.
in New Zealand. They're like, don't worry, you've got job security. You've been here 100. We've been around 100 years. I'm like, oh, great. So at Red Cross, I was really proud of what I achieved. We had an induction program that we built and made that didn't exist. A leadership program that was totally developed from scratch. And as you said, I was also asked to facilitate it as part of my role. I thought I was very happy with that, how that turned out. We had a lot of good feedback from that. And the third thing was an e-learning platform. We launched an e-learning platform. They had some e-learning already, but as you know, Red Cross is made up of volunteers as well as paid staff. And a lot of e-learning platforms, you have to pay per user. And Red Cross had so many volunteers, they always felt isolated from the learning because we couldn't afford to give them the learning, even an e-learning lesson, which would be kind of basic things. So I was able to locate a provider that charged just one fee for the organization, regardless of how many users you want. And then opened up doors where all the volunteers could take any learning that they wanted. And even
Ah,
internationally with Red Cross, the different uh, councils in the Pacific, they could get online. If they can get online, they could access the platform and we could share our learning even with them. So it really opened up a lot of doors. So those were my three big accomplishments there. Then there was a little bit of a change of management, and they didn't feel they had the funding for both my role and an HR role. So HR won, and I got disestablished. And it really scared me. Here I am talking about being scared again, but I'm like, what? How could you do that? I'm doing amazing work here. Look at what I've done, and I can keep doing all this stuff if I'm here.
do you really think it was a
And
funding issue over what is important? Because I always feel that if something's important, you will always find a resource or the funding to actually enable that specific thing or role. Do you know what I mean? And I personally thought it was more of a priority thing, that learning and development wasn't viewed as important as HR. But to me, they kind of work hand in hand, don't they? Really and truly. So that's
well, I
just my
can't
view of
totally
it.
speak to their reasons. I guess that's
Mm.
the reason I use to make me feel better. I say that, well, they didn't get rid of me because they didn't like me. They got rid of me because they couldn't afford me. But no, you're perfectly right. And one thing that people in L&D will find is that a lot of times training, they do say, "Oh, is it that important? You really have to have it." But it's not like I had a big team of people. I had to work with stakeholders, but I was kind of doing it myself. Um,
Now, you churned out
and
a
actually,
big body
that's
of
what's
work.
happened. Pardon me?
I remember you churned out a big body of work during your time there. You put in the graft. I remember seeing so much information, resources that you had developed and put out, and like I said, sat in training sessions and seeing the training and also the development happen, especially with some of the people who I was managing as well, who had
Oh, good.
taken a number of your training sessions as well. But yeah, during your period you was more like a solo band. You know, that one guy who's got the drum on the back and the cymbals and everything. That was really you for that whole department, just playing everything.
Right.
Mm.
Right. And actually, with my other roles, in some instances, that's what got me the position was because larger organizations usually have a big team of people. You might have two that just develop e-learning or two that just facilitate or whatever it might be, or determine the needs, where I've always had to do the whole thing. And each job I went through and progressed through, I grew in a skill, which I've been, again, blessed to do. Like, even though Red Cross, it was a scary thing to be without work because I had the family and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not working, and that's what struck me like, I got to pay the mortgage. My wife is working now and she could pay all the other bills, like the utility bills and things and food, but not the mortgage. So that really hit home. But then I ended up contracting for a few jobs. And that was, again, quite good because they're different skills. The first one was with the Tertiary Education Commission, which was good because it broke me into the government space. Uh, and I basically worked at their call center, upskilling their team because they would get calls on all the different funds that's what TEC does is they handle all the funding for education in New Zealand, the higher level education. And so I had to give them resources and train them where they could learn a little bit about a lot of things. And in that role, I was uh, consulted a lot of people. I had to work with a lot of subject matter experts, SMEs, and understand the fund. And then I would go away and make the content and say, here you go. Then after that job, I went to public health, regional public health, which again is another totally different job. And they're very collaborative. So instead of just working with a SME and then going away and doing the work, what they liked is for you to sit down with people in a room and do it from the ground up altogether. So that was another step in growth that I hadn't really done before. Where they struggled at health is they're so under resourced, they couldn't use the same tools that I would maybe use at TEC or other organizations. For example, e-learning, which people will know, doing lessons on a computer. I had to reserve a computer down the hallway to go down to use it to be able to do an e-learning module because we couldn't do that at our desk computers because of the IT
Mm,
capability. And so e-learning was not going to be the way for them to learn because it wasn't
mm,
practical. So I do think it's important to really broaden and think of a suite, like how can you deliver? Do you deliver in a workshop? Can you, because of where people are located? Are they all over the country?
mm,
Do you, um, have webinars where they ask questions? Do you have printed resources or not? So in a way, I really like that challenge of kind of figuring out what the needs are, what the capabilities are, and then aligning the two and saying, how can I help them out? And trying to think outside the box and getting others to think outside the box. Like even being creative in a training session. I remember once with the airline, I set up the room as if you were on the airplane, so then you could visualize a little bit like where your emergency equipment was, because you try to show it on a diagram and people couldn't quite get it. So little things like that. I just always try to think outside the box to really engage and make sure people are understanding. And then from public health, then I went into, well, then the contracting market started to get pretty tight. And I was offered a job at civil aviation. So I thought, oh, I better take that. So even though the salary's less, I'm enjoying the work. Now, they started me with working on, there's a new Civil Aviation Act that recently came out. And so they formed a team of people. Everybody was on a different discipline. They had a comms person, me for learning and development. They had two different policy people for the different types of policy. And we basically were in charge of taking this new piece of legislation and introducing it to the authority. And so I had to make sure, for example, the training that people understood it and could get signed off by the director to be able to regulate it. And then now that project has launched. So now I'm back in a team of people. It's in a little bit of a larger team, but we're doing all the learning for all the inspectors for CA. And by inspector, that term means a lot of things. It could be investigators if there's a plane crash. It's the people that do monitoring where they go out regularly to airports or to pilots to see how they're doing and if they meet the different qualifications, the different airlines, and then also going to certification. When they get applications, somebody wants to, start up an airline or start flying as a pilot. So all those are inspectors, and I kind of am support the training over that whole group.
What
So
role
it's
do you
really
hold
kind of
there?
been a real variety, like I said, and you kind of wonder why you're went from all these different, really different sectors. I look back and it was good that I left Red Cross actually because I'm earning quite a bit more. Excuse me.
So
And
sorry, just before I ask, what role do you do at CAA?
uh, my role at CAA is a senior learning and development advisor, basically. But now I'm on the safety delivery. They just gave me a new title. I have to even think what it's called. Safety delivery team. But
Also, a
I'm a
lot of
senior
pressure in
advisor,
that role
safety
then.
delivery team. Pardon me?
a lot of pressure in that role, you know.
Well, well, that's true. You hear things and you just want to make sure that you're. What's very unique with where I'm working now, because we're developing a new program, my boss and I are changing the on the job training. And a lot of companies that you go to, that you go through, say, your regular learning. Well, normally there's recruitment, you get hired, onboarding, you fill out all the paperwork. Induction is any learning you need that everybody in the organization needs. And then you have your on the job training. So usually that's the cycles that you would go through. Uh, what and then on the job training oftentimes would come after that. Like after you've gotten all your training, then we let you go and you go on the job and you get coached a little bit and learn what to do. Or other places I've worked, they're like, oh, we can't wait for them to start work on the job. So you would do your learning and then you would take maybe so much time out of your day to do some things on the job. So they worked in parallel. Now, what we're doing at CAA, which is really, I haven't seen it done anywhere, is we're actually integrating the on the job with the learning as you learn. So, as you're learning things and going through different stages, that's actually being applied on the job at the exact same time. And you'll have an experience of a day on the job, and then you reflect on what you've pulled from that day and connect it to the learning you're receiving.
Mm.
So it's this is still under development a little bit, but that really exciting me because it's really different than anywhere else I've been. I mean, you keep thinking everywhere is going to be the same, but every place is different, even in government. Every organization is so different. Um, so that's kind of where I am. I know I kind of went through my personal story versus like learning and development as far as helping, but there are different kind of roles that you go through. Like I said, I kind of lucked out that I learned L&D doing the whole thing. You have to work with a lot of people, but I had to learn every aspect of it. Sometimes big organizations, you can't, you become very specialized and then only hire you for certain aspects. Like we had someone that lost a role where I am now at CAA. And with the new positions that were created, she couldn't quite slot into them because of her experience, which was a
That's one thing
shame,
I
but it's
wanted
just the
to
way it works.
that's one thing I wanted to know about, that with someone like yourself who's involved in learning and development with all the experience, how do you keep yourself, number one, motivated to learn? Because you can't be somebody who is a learning and development, in a sense, champion and not be someone who is a learner. Do you know what I mean? You can't just be somebody who's just quite lay, who just takes it as it comes. So you have to be a learner yourself to be able to teach people about learning and development. So how do you keep yourself motivated to continually learn and upskill and understand new things to then teach people to do the very same and understand, I guess, the sector that they're in, or a specific area around the sector that they're in? How do you do that? Or what keeps you doing that?
Well, I do think that you learn just even in life.
Hmm.
Uh, there's a lot of ways people learn, uh, and everybody learns differently. I feel like I've been in the industry a lot of times where sometimes I just know instinctively what to do or an approach to take. And other people couldn't say that. But it's true. You do always kind of need to grow and learn, and things change. And as new discoveries come up, that impacts, say, approaches. Now, I'm not the big academic learning and development person. There's some people that I work with, for example, that are very academic focused, and they talk about all these different models from different universities and things. And uh, I mean, some of that I can appreciate, and I'll look at it and say, "Yep, that makes sense." But that's not my big drive that I enjoy. But what I will do is, if I hear of a need, or as I come across something, I'll say, "Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of that." Or, "Gee, what can be done in that field?" And then I will research it, and then I'll get more information to do it. Um, some learning and development people, what you'll find is they do get stuck in that loop, and they had a set of research once and they do that over and over and over again for 100 years and they never adjust that.
Mm,
So I do agree that it's important to be aware of the latest studies that are happening. Not so much training models, but and the other thing is that every time you work with different people, they bring something different to the conversation. Like I have a boss at CAA that's fairly new boss to me, and he was sharing some materials from his old workplace and some of the models that they used. And I said, "Oh, I hadn't seen that particular one before. That one I know, that one I've seen." Because a lot of them are out in the training world. It's just whatever you kind of latch onto or if you can make it applicable. But one model he had I didn't really like. And I'm like, okay, well, this is why I don't really connect with that. Or I don't think I would use that one. I would maybe use a different one. You made me think of at Red Cross, and I know that's been a while, but there was some research I did there that was very exciting for me with the action learning.
mm,
I don't know if you remember that. That's actually something that's been around a long time, but that's where you learn through asking questions instead of someone telling you something. You sit around a table and say, "We're trying to solve a problem." And everybody goes around the room and just asks a question. Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Have you thought of this? And it kind of broadens your mind uh, to different points of view or different perspectives that you hadn't considered. But yet they're not making the decision for you. It just gives you more things to reflect on. Um, or like I developed something at public health where now we're running into some issues with CAA, learning issues. And I'm like, boy, that would really work here. So that's a benefit I have of being at different places. And I feel like that's what inspired me is like, oh, I can help you with that. I know just the thing. Um, because the more I've been exposed to between an organization and people, the more I've heard about. I'm not always up on the cutting edge things, and maybe I'd need to be better at that. But if I do hear of something I'm unfamiliar with, I'll investigate it. Even if I see like a job interview, like I'll every now and then I just see what jobs are out there. They'll mention different skills, and I'm like, gee, what is that? I'm not familiar with that, and I'll use Mr. Google and then I dive into that a little bit just to broaden my own understanding.
do you think your view of life leads you to act in that way? Because the reason why I ask is that there are so many people who are in different sectors, but they do things because they feel it's what I have to do or it's what we've always done. And there's no hunger, in a sense, to grow or learn further or develop further. But the way you're
Mm,
talking, and from what I've seen as well, there's always been, and this is the one thing I've found since I've known you, which has been consistent, is that hunger and that desire. Like when we have met up a few times since you had left, which is really just a handful of times, you've always started telling me about this new training thing that you're bringing in or what you're doing at this place or what's happened at that place, and the way you're trying to actually rework something. But to me, that's just shown the consistent hunger that you've had. But some people don't have that hunger, and that's what I'm
ah.
trying to pinpoint, is that where does that hunger for you come from? Is it because of your faith and how you view life that you need to keep going because you're serving a higher purpose in what you do? Um, because some people won't see things in that way and won't act in that way, especially in the L&D space, from what I've seen, as well.
Well, I don't do it for my faith consciously,
Mm,
but it does make you part of who you are, and if that's what comes out of you, then that's a good thing.
mm.
Um, I do try to help people. I'm a genuine, you know, I I try to support because again, that's what I like about L&D is I feel like you're helping people. So I guess if I see something that I can make better for the learner, then that excites me.
So
That gives me a little bit of heart. No
it's
one's ever told
it's a
me this, so
servanthood view,
I
isn't
hadn't
it?
reflected on it. Pardon
It's a
me?
view of a servant, really, that you're actually providing a service, but you're serving people through the skills that have been given to you. and the gifts that have been given to you to give back in a way. Is that how you view it? Because that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I've never been told that. I mean, I can say that I'm passionate about learning and I get creative. I think outside the box, and I do think of the learner. I'm learner focused. Like, what does do the individual need? I'll always say, well, why are we doing that? What do they really need? And I try to. I'm an organizer. I'm one of the owls, so I'm a list person, and as you could tell with me rattling away. Step one, I did this job. Then step two, I did that job. So I'm methodical.
You're definitely not a
Um,
peacock, are you?
No, but my brother thought I was because I like performing. And like with my performing, he thought I did it for the attention. But I'm like, Mike, you don't understand me at all with my performing. I said, it's just a talent you have to let out. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't, I don't know if I'm trying to think. I know you're creative, but I'm not sure what you do as hobbies, like if you paint or do things, but, or sing, but some of that you just need to let out of your system. And, I lost my train of thought.
We was just talking about the difference because you mentioned that you're more of an owl character than an actual, and I said
The
you're not a
peacock, yeah,
peacock as a joke. Yeah.
he thought with my performing, I do it for the attention, but actually for me, it was just, uh, I, after I perform and you bow, you're like, yep, I did a good job on that. Or, I was able to be creative and move people to that. One thing with my theater, that skill that I have is that's why I like to do stuff face to face when I can, is I can feel the energy of the person. And I can feel, it may sound weird, but I can feel when you're moving an audience one way versus another. Like you're moving, yeah, you're making them feel something. And I can tell that and I can tweak or adjust based on that. So that's why I can facilitate well as too, because I can feel the energy in the room and know where it's heading and what it's doing,
Uh,
where you lose some of that sensation when you're online. Um,
yes, there's always a challenge, isn't
it
there,
is,
with online um, e-learning in a way and online learning, like video calls compared to actually face-to-face interaction. Some
yeah, that's
people who
very
are
hard to
more,
do.
yeah, more
And it
introverted people
restricts you with the
prefer that.
activities. You can't do the interactive activities, and you don't have the casual discussion that you would normally get uh, in a room. Like you don't have that other social interaction and building relationships. You lose that to
But
some degree.
it's also gauging the vibe of the room. And I guess there's a different type of aura or presence when you're actually in um, a collective of people. If you're all focused on one specific thing that you're there to learn or find out or problem solve, compared to doing it online, it's very different, isn't it? And you actually have more time with the people if you're with them, even if you take breaks, than you do when you're online. Because we all know what online is. It's very synthetic. It's not the same
Yeah.
as being in the same room as someone.
At CAA, what we do is oftentimes we use e-learning before you go to a workshop. So it's often done together with a workshop,
So all of the pre-work
or
is
it'll be
done.
for real foundational content.
Mm,
And then when you need to learn more, then you get together. But I know that's
mm.
more costly. So there's always those pressures as well. So you have to think, how creative can we be? Or do you have the facilitator travel like I did with Red Cross to a region rather than having all the learners travel to a location to, yeah. So there's all those things that have to be weighed up and you try to be pragmatic about things. Um, and I think my theater helped too, because it just went through my mind, the show must go on. Because the other thing that happens with some places is you go, you talk about stuff forever and it never gets across the line. So at some point, you just have to say, yes, let's just get it started or do it. You want to plan as much as you can, but public health, in my opinion, had that little bit of a circumstance, but they have mostly doves there because they're very caring people. And so part of that type of personality is to where you talk about things and you socialize things and you are empathetic with each other, but then you need an eagle to jump in every once in a while, or these different types to kind of move stuff along. So
That's
that's another hazard that can come in the L&D space.
mm,
Um, yeah, but
mm.
yeah, you're right. A lot of companies, I guess that's true. They'll take the same thing and just do it over and over and over again. Uh,
Do you think that's because they're just either they either they don't find the right people who have, I guess, the creative, expansive thinking to bring something new, or there's what you mentioned about mitre 10 with the pockets of cultures, because that's one thing I've realized here is that, especially in the employment space, there's a lot of legacy culture that's still going on through organizations that old boys, it's just about us type, and they try to keep things in the same way so that things continue in a way that supports their culture um as well. Or do you also think they just cannot be bothered to do anything new because they've been stuck in a rut
well,
for
it
so
just might mean
long?
you have to move more slowly. Uh, but part of it's what you accept. You know, you go to an organization and say, I accept that this is the way the culture is and I'm happy there. Or
Mm,
no, that's not my culture. I don't feel that that's got the same belief system that I do or the same way of outlook towards learning that I have. So that's one reason in the interview you try to, find a culture that aligns. But oftentimes, at least verbally, they say they're trying to move a certain direction. So you try to support that. Um,
do you also think it's
but
the way
it
we
works both
communicate?
ways. You have to also work into the culture of the organization.
Do you think it's also the way we communicate L&D in an organization? Because when I've sat and thought about learning and development, number one, it's because when you're a person who's interested in learning more, you take more interest in learning and development as a not necessarily department, but what comes from the organization. But one thing I've noticed from colleagues that I've spoken to is that the whole learning and development thing is something we have to do. Do you know what I mean? Rather than wanting to grow and wanting to learn and
Right.
development because they do their job, they know how to do their job. Why do I need to learn more? And to me, I still feel that that's a massive gap that's missed in a lot of maybe not yours, but in a lot of organizations where the employee feels it's just part of what I have to do to tick a box to get management off my back, rather than I actually want to know this. I actually want to study this to actually grow in it. I think there's still that tussle that goes on as well.
Well, that's the type of learning that's delivered.
Mm,
You got to have the type of learning that people want to go to it and be like, oh, when can I go to that because I enjoy it so much?
mm,
Or boy, it was really practical. Boy, did I have takeaways I could do. But there's no doubt people will say, oh, I've got to go to training today. My father-in-law is an ex-firefighter and he'd be like, oh, I got training. Um, so part of it's keeping it interesting and maybe throwing a curveball that they're not expecting. So then they do get something out of the session. And if they have a historical bad experience, it takes a while to kind of convert them. Or maybe you just have to meet them with a different type of learning. Maybe you get together in small groups and have real short sharing things rather than a big formal, say, workshop or e-learning. Maybe that's not what's going to get people excited is to do e-learning. Maybe people like the e-learning where they can do it on their own time, but even that could be designed differently where it's engaging or not. At CAA, what I've done with the e-learning I develop is I stick a lot of pictures in it
mm,
because what I find is that the airline inspector is really passionate about aviation. And so while they're going through the e-learning, they'll say, "Oh, there's a da 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 aircraft, from whatever." And so it just kind of even subconsciously kind of gets, lifts them up a little bit because it's not just so much text that they're reading or reading stuff that they know. Like another thing with the on the job training we're working at is we don't want you to, like, you'll know with some of the NZQA unit standards, how they do it with what used to be called the industry training organizations. You have to like justify what you know. You have to write down all this stuff that you did already or that you to say to prove to you that I know this. I have to write all these documents and hand you that big pile of evidence. And the learner's like, oh my gosh, this is a waste of my time to fill all this out. But I realize you need some kind of proof. But that's why we're trying to integrate it to while it's being done, that can be captured. And then you don't have to justify yourself when it's all said and done. So I would say, to your point, that yes, probably a lot of that is there, but that would be the way the training is designed. It's not being made engaging enough. In fact, I try to make training when I actually started to say another thing at Red Cross. I made a list I was in charge of revising the policy for reward and recognition. And you say it doesn't always have to cost money to reward. I said, well, even learning and development can be a reward. Hey, we're going to allow you to attend this workshop that's for something that you really have a passion about that maybe they wouldn't normally go on. And I used to joke and say, wouldn't it be great when you get to the point in the culture that you say, Peter, you are such a good employee. Guess what? We're going to let you take not one, but 2 e-learning modules. Okay. That's your reward for. So that's really stretching it. But if you have opportunities where learning and development is seen as a reward or something that not everybody can even get to do, or we'll pay money for you to go on this. We can only select 3 people because of our finances, but we see you as a hypo, what they call it, high performance, you want to give opportunities to them.
But that shows also two things to the employee or the person that's receiving that. One, it shows that the organization or the company or whoever it is recognizes you for your work. But also, two, it shows their investment in you as well, which I guess motivates you further to go further, to develop more. So it has that effect, doesn't it? Which I think is lacking as well in a lot of places, that people don't feel recognized for their work. It's not enough to just tell someone, or you're doing a good job. How are you actually showing me I'm doing a good job? How are you actually investing in me? And I think from what I've seen, especially in organizations and companies, is that they actually always lose their good people because there's no investment into those people. And and to me, that's where I see where learning and development really should be thriving in organizations, is to actually help people learn, but to lead to their development. Because to me, L&D is grouped as L&D, but we mainly see a lot of the L part, but not a lot of the D part as well. And I think that's the
Right.
thing why people get fed up and then go and leave. And then it's that cycle again, isn't it?
Right. And it's
You
too
just,
focused on the organization and not the
mm,
individual,
yeah.
because you're thinking what's going to help the organization with learning. But in reality, you got to say what's going to help this person be the best they can be to contribute to the organization.
Mm,
What interests do they have? I mean, you have to have a certain amount of alignment, but a percentage of the learning at least has to be with the individual in mind, because that's what you're going to enjoy learning what you want to learn. You're not going to like doing homework in a class that you hate. You're going to love doing homework in a class that you love, right? I even heard just on the radio, yeah, about somebody that was taking law and they had to read so much law
mm,
stuff that they stopped reading. And this was me as well. I had to read so many business texts that I got away from reading just socially. And I used to love to read all these, mystery stories and everything. And I had so much other reading to do that it kind of burned me out. And so I don't read nearly as much as I used to, which is a
mm.
shame because that triggered a lot of creativity and things.
Well, that's the one issue, isn't it? When you work and you have to do a lot of background reading and reading of documents and reading of papers, it does affect. It's happened to me as well. It does affect what you do outside of work in terms of reading and stuff, because you read so much that I'm just a bit too tired of reading
It starts to
at
burn
the
you out
moment.
to read.
Yeah, it
Right.
does. But just 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 moving forward, I wanted to just talk about parts of your faith, because even since I've known you, before I even knew you were a Catholic, there was a presence about you, a very calm, collected, respected person. you always spoke, well. You always spoke well of people. You never spoke ill of people, regardless what had happened. I always noticed that there was something different about Joe. But you've mentioned that you're a Catholic. Would you consider yourself a devout Catholic?
Yes. There's things that when you think of someone who's devout and say holy or something, what do they do? And I don't really do that. And I should, you can always be a better person. You can always pray more. You can do less sinning. But, it is a part of my life and I would never deny my faith. And I do go weekly and, no, I try to encourage the kids to see God around them, say, oh, you know, oh, look at that rainbow in the sky. Wasn't that nice that God did that for us today? Or, oh, we're struggling. Well, don't forget to say a prayer. Let's say a prayer about it. Um, so I don't feel like I'm where people would say, oh, that guy's over the top, but it is integral to my life. And I don't know how people live without a faith because when they face struggles, I don't know how they cope. In fact, some people, when they go through a bad time, they forsake God because they get mad at him. And that's hard for me to comprehend because I can't, I don't think I would do that. I think no matter, if anything, any tragedy would make me pray more or go to God more because he's the only one that can solve it. I'd be like, well, God, you can fix it. I can't, please help me out. And then I trust
What
that
has
or
led
pray
you
to
to
the
that
saints
though?
to help.
What has led you to that um way of living? Because
I don't know.
some people would be the opposite, as you've mentioned. They're angry at the fact that this is happening to them. But is are there things that you've actually experienced through life that has actually pulled you more into that way of alignment?
Well, I was raised in this faith, and I had parents, that demonstrated the faith I felt. And uh, I remember once my dad, I don't know how this happened, but he gave me like a medal, but it was a medal with a cross on it. And that was very moved that he did that. I went to Catholic school just up until through the third grade, and then I transferred to public school in America because it was too expensive for our family. But I got a good foundation with that. Um, and then, I just think in a way as well, I think, God's prepped me for things and, I've had religious dreams sometimes, or I'll have like even before coming to New Zealand, there was about a year of time where I just had this unsettledness in me and I knew something was going to happen in my life, but I didn't know what. And then after I moved here and got married, then that feeling went away. So maybe it's because I'm in tune with feelings doing theater and stuff. I can feel things or get vibes, so to speak. But as far as what makes anybody a good person, I don't know. I try to be a good person and I try to be nice to people. I do, like you said, I do try to give people the benefit of a doubt. And sometimes that annoys other people around me, like where they'll say, but they're doing this to you, or someone will be like, yeah, well, maybe they just had a bad day. And so blah, blah, blah.
Mm,
So I do try to give people the benefit. With my dad, he never swore at home. He would swear when he worked at the steel mills for years.
mm,
But at home, he said he always kept it out of the home. So I never just picked it up in my language.
mm.
So I think even good language kind of helps you. Um,
I would
I
agree
don't
with
know.
language. Yeah, yeah, it is. I agree with the whole language thing. That it's a standard you're setting, isn't it? And if you're the person who is, I guess, the legal authority in the home, there's a standard that sits within that legal framework as the parent. And if you're not adhering to that standard that you're actually trying to, I wouldn't say impose, but I guess imprint on your children, then it's really hypocritical, isn't it? So Yeah, language is
Yeah,
a
I
good thing.
don't
It's the
really
same at home
discipline
for
the
us.
kids around all their language. Some of their language I would, but some I try
Mm.
not to be too strict because I'm probably the stricter one, and my wife's the one that's a little more lax. I'm older than my wife. My wife's 13 years younger, but I think my kids respect me for how I am, and they know not to go past a certain point. But there is some flexibility with, you know,
So they
what
know
they
the
do, and
boundary that they can operate in,
yeah,
or
they can operate in where it'll be like,
oh,
well,
yeah.
yeah, because they have their own
Let's
struggles they're
push dad
working
today.
through.
Let's push dad today and see how far we can stretch the bound.
Uh,
I just
well,
also
my
wanted to
son once
ask.
said that I tell him no a lot, and I said, "Oh, don't
Mm,
say that." I said, "I try not to tell you no. Just don't ask me things that I have to tell you no for."
but that's the whole part of pushing the boundary, isn't it? I did want to ask about, has there been a period or time where you've just sat and thought to yourself, do you know what? Like, I don't really understand this. Um, as a Catholic, I don't understand what this is about. You know, have you ever felt,
Oh, the faith.
yeah,
Well, maybe it's because I taught religion to like teenager kids, where they're kind of asking that kind of stuff. The big thing I told them is you have to trust the church like a parent. I said it's going to tell you things that might make no sense to you. But what you do is you accept it and then you think about it and say, why would they tell me not to do that? Oh, that's right. Don't stick your hand on the oven because maybe 9 times out of 10 you won't get burned, but the one time the oven was left on, you'll burn your hand. So it's like, okay, they have my best interests at heart. So they're trying to lead us to holiness. And so that's kind of the anchor. I just the church and the faith. And uh at the end of the day, sometimes you just have to tell yourself, well, at the end of the day, you stand before God, and, he's going to be the one that decides, even if you were questioning something with the church. But I try to trust them as completely as I can, because I believe the church is from God. So you either believe it or you don't. You either have your faith or you don't have it. You can't really pick and choose stuff.
but there's also some, how can I put it? There's also a lot of people who have faith, but you can clearly see that there's just some major red flags within their faith in terms of how they operate, how they talk. I'm not saying you per se, but there's a number of people that I have encountered who say, I'm a Christian, but then there are things that you question because their behavior shows you what they think and what they believe, right? Unless they're wearing a mask,
Well,
right?
but you have to say too that people are human, and they're going to
Mm,
sin. So even if I do something, I can still believe in God and cherish the love of God, but be a sinner. But you have to be willing to own up to that.
mm.
And then a big part of the Catholic faith is also forgiveness. So you have to be able to forgive people when they do stuff to you. I remember once when I was a kid, I had somebody steal something from me, and I knew who it was. And I was so angry and had so much anger to them. And I said, you know what? I'm taught to forgive. I'm going to forgive them. So every time the thought used to stop and pop into my head of being angry, my brain would say, oh no, you said you forgave them. You can't get upset about it. And then eventually that just went away. So we have to recognize people are human beings. The other thing, my favorite Bible verse is in Peter, and it says, love covers a multitude of sins. So when I really screw up, I just try to be as loving as I can and figure that, well, you know, I can still be loving, and that kind of won't make me be so tarnished. So those are my two things. But I'm not, yeah, I don't like read the Bible every day. I do pray every day. I try to have conversations with God throughout the day. But that's really my rock, is my church. Like I said, if anything happened, who else you going to turn to? And sometimes you almost test it, like you're broke or something. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm broke. And what happens? The very last second, you get like a birthday money or something, and you're like, why did I get that money? And it's like, oh my gosh. So it's not like I test God all the time or something, but if something does happen, I can see him taking care of things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you really did take care of it. Or like I said, I'll get a vibe like, stay away from that. That's getting bad news. Or I'll get a vibe like something's going to happen, or keep your eyes open. And then it does. So I don't know. I guess we're all different. I mean, I've talked to some Christians. There was a Christian group at our work up until recently because the person who kind of ran it has since left. And they weren't Catholics. They were, different Christian faiths, but they all shared their experience once about prayer. Sorry, my computer had a frown face and said, "We don't like you. We'll come back."
Yeah, no, it's all good. You was only gone
But
for about
anyway, so
two
I know
minutes.
people have different experiences in their faith, and that's just some of what mine are.
Do you think that's part of the the biggest issue within Christianity is that you have a Christian faith that the focal point of the Christian faith is Christ. Christ is the savior. And there are a number of these different viewpoints, that has led to these different denominations, a different way in how they actually practice their faith, things that they have added, things that they have potentially taken away. And do you think there's quite a big, how can I put it, separation within the Christian faith
Well,
from
we
what you've
we need we
experienced
need
and
to be
seen?
able to look at people and see Christ in each other.
Yeah.
And uh,
Well, that's quite hard, really,
like
isn't it?
I know that like Pope Francis, recently passed. What I heard a priest talking about him in a homily, and he said that what Pope Francis was encouraging was listening.
Mm,
Uh, it's one thing to instruct and grow people in the faith, but we have to listen to each other and kind of take them at their starting point and bring them along the ride. And that wasn't happening enough. And that it's important to hear where people are. Uh, I mean, faith is a gift as far as the different denominations. Like, I don't really, I mean, I hang around with my Catholic community when I go to church and stuff, and you see people, and, uh, but I kind of interact with people as people. Like, I don't really go to a lot of other Christian events to see how we're alike or different. Do you know what I mean? I just am exposed to people, and so I try to be Catholic/Christian to people. So I'm not around them to really talk about differences a lot or to even think about it. Like I'm not thinking about other people's faith. I'm thinking about my faith. I mean, when I get Jehovah Witnesses that come to the door, I'll tell them, I'll say, I think it's commendable that are enough of an evangelist for your faith with what you believe in that you go around. So I tell them, I said, but I'm happy in my faith. I'm happy in my faith, and that's kind of all I tell them. And they say, okay, bye. Here's something if you want to read it. Um, there used to be historically with the Catholics, they would caution other people having religious conversations because you might misunderstand or you might look at things through a different lens and not get like the Catholic perspective on it. But I think it's healthy to have religious debate and discussion. But you're right. At the end of the day, they're all about Christ and loving.
mm. I do
I mean, I
think,
think, I mean, I'm Catholic and stayed Catholic because
mm,
I guess I was raised Catholic, but also I feel that the Catholics started from Christ and the other Christian faiths I feel broke away from us. But it doesn't mean I look down on them. I just feel that they're missing. Like, I know Christians, there's some Christians that'll say, why do you pray to the Blessed Mother, for example? And I'll say, well, it's not that I so much pray to her, I talk to her and Jesus loves his mother. So I love his mother, you know, and I can see where she had to be in a holy state to be able to be the mother of Christ. And as a parent, she helped raise Christ. So she gets some special reverence from me, but I don't put her above God. I think that I can talk to Mary just like Jesus could and say, hey, Heavenly Mother, Blessed Mother, can you, talk to Jesus for me? Or can you, comfort me like you comforted, you held Jesus off the cross. Some of this then connects with my theater. See, everything's kind of intertwined. And I talk about this sometimes when I give religious conferences, is that one thing when you're acting to put you in a scene, I might have told you this before, is you go through the senses in your mind. What am I feeling right now? What do I see in front of me? What am I tasting or touching? Because if something's burning's in the kitchen next to you and you're an actor, you got to react to that, right? You're smelling something. So, and you know what? I had somebody tell me once about the Via Dolorosa when I was doing video. They said, you know what? I know what blood smells like. They were a nurse. And I thought, how powerful is that? So in prayer, you could reflect being at the crucifixion and you could smell the blood, hear the shouting. And I try to convey that in my music when I sing.
Mm,
I'm not
mm,
like the best singer in the world, but my CDs are called prayer and song. So I just try to, yeah, put myself in what comes out.
mm, mm.
So, yeah, I guess
I
I didn't
would say,
really answer your question
yeah,
about
but
the
I
other
would say
Christian faiths.
from what you
I
were
don't
saying,
think about that.
yeah, okay, no, no, no. That I mean, that's understandable. I think for some of us who think about the differences in just the different denominations, is that there needs to be a central point of unification, right, within the faiths for them to be Christian, right? There's a reason why, and there's some to me that just seem a bit, you know, odd, or they move off that way or move off that way as well. And I've always found that the central point or reasoning of what Christianity is and what a Christian is, all of these denominations should be united in that belief and agree to that belief that it is in Christ and in Christ alone, as well. And I do think that from what I've seen, especially lately, um, that there are so many differences and viewpoints that people have about what it is to be a Christian, what makes a Christian. Some people think you need to be a good person, but, the Bible teaches that nobody is good. So to me, that's impossible, but it's only through Christ that God looks at us and we're seen perfect if we believe in Christ in the image of, of his, of his son as well. But yeah, I do think that it's, I do agree with you that it it's healthy to have these religious debates. And I think we should actually, like what you said, listen to people a lot more, because I don't think we spend enough time with other people to actually understand why they think the way they think, where they're at, where they're at as well. We often sit within our bubbles and then view things within our bubbles and then pay less time to others. Whereas Christ actually went out. He went
Yep.
into these pockets of communities with those who were viewed outside of the communities, who were excommunicated, like the lepers, all of these people, the tax collectors, the ones who were viewed with disdain by the Pharisees. And he went and sat with them. As he said, he's come to heal the sick, you know,
Yeah, you kind of
as
solicit them
well.
to
And
where they're at and then try to bring them on the journey. Yeah, just try to.
yeah, but I don't think we do it enough within the Christian circle as a whole. I know there's a lot more online that's happening, but I still think there needs to be a lot more listening, as well.
Hmm.
But yeah. So just before we finish off, I just wanted to talk about your performing, because I actually found a few of your videos online on YouTube, of you singing. But I noticed they were from a couple of them were from quite a few years ago. One was, I think, from 8 years ago. Um, and one I think was from 12 years ago. And it might have been at the Vatican because it seemed like a very big platform that you were on when you were performing, and you had like a black suit on. And I
Yeah, I
think the
generally
minister
wear
was
a
talking
tux with a
beforehand.
a tux with a white tie and a white vest is my
Yeah, 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 yeah.
what I generally wear. But a lot of what's online are some of the religious conferences that I've done. A lot of the professional theater you didn't really record
Mm.
because you couldn't. You know, you're really not allowed to with copyright and things. So a lot of my professional stuff's not. Um, but there's bits and pieces floating around of things. I'd have to
And you
even
have
look
a
and see
page
what's
as
out
well. I
online
found you
on
had
me.
not a page, a channel. You've also got a YouTube channel, because that's where I just plonked your name into the search bar and it actually brought up
Huh.
your channel.
Well,
And
I've
that's where
only
I saw
got
a couple of those
I've got a
performances from.
couple, yeah, I took a couple songs that I had done off my recording and I set them to with photos, like images. It's not me singing live. It's my recorded version. There's St. Joseph's Lullaby and there's Via Dolorosa. And then behind I have
Yes.
the images that people can use as like a reflection. Yeah, I should really take the time to do more of that. I actually have a website, but that also needs to be updated because I haven't done it in quite a long time. But when I used to
Well,
sell
send me
more of
the link to that and
my recordings
I'll plonk it in
online
the
or
description. Yeah,
okay, but I
as
do need to
well.
update it. People will,
Oh yeah.
it's just josephmoorman.com, but yep, I can do that.
So just in closing, because I understand
Yes.
it's through today, and thank you for your time. Just in closing, what I like to do is ask the guest to leave us here at the frequency of the Kaleidoscope Mind with something to ponder about, whether it's a quote, whether it's a saying, whether it's something that you want to leave to have impact. Um, Now's the time. I just like to ask the guests to just leave us with something that we can chew on here at the Kaleidoscope Mind and think about and ponder moving forward after our conversation, delving into your mind. So, is there anything that you'd like to leave with the Kaleidoscope Mind?
If I if I would have known ahead of time, I would have found something very witty and clever. I guess as far as tying in with learning and development as well as the faith and some of the different discussions we had, I would just say try to look at every person you encounter in life and do your best to support them in some way. At Red Cross, we talked about the giant plus sign. Remember, I'd say when you go to someone, walk away leaving them better than they were than that when you found them. So I would say here, if it's learning and development, look at the person in front of you and think about what can actually help them. With your faith, look at the people right around you and say, you know, can I make you feel special or remember to thank you for something? Or, yeah, and I'm rambling, but then I'm thinking as well, it made me think about remember to thank people. I had to have an operation once, and when I came through that, the thing that crossed my mind is make don't forget to thank people.
Uh,
You got to thank people. I wrote the doctors and the ones that when you're unconscious, you don't know who's even in the room. So I said, I don't know who you were, but thank you for taking care of me. So thank you, Peter, for what you do, and I hope that I achieved what you had hoped out of your podcast, and that your listeners can pull something out of listening to Joe talk.
oh, well, it's been